My loves, you are in for such a treat this week. In this episode, I'm doing an interview with my new nutritionist, Jiordana. The reason why Jiordana really stuck out to me is that she talks about pathogens that are in our bodies that could cause all sorts of issues, and cancer being one of them. Jiordana is an amazingly special person. She's a certified nutritionist, she's a certified hypnotherapist, she's the founder of the Mind-Full Clinic. She specializes in mental health and nutrition. She really dives deep into rewiring and subconscious to facilitate long-term changes around health behaviors. But it's so much more than that. And in this episode, we cover a lot on pathogens because in relation to cancer, it's really important that we know this. And I've learned a little bit about it, but holy moly, does she ever dive deep. So I hope that you listen to this episode and you can just appreciate her depth of knowledge. I do also want to mention that at one point of the podcast, things kind of got like the internet got a little bit glitchy. And our podcast ended up dropping in the middle of it and we had to restart it halfway through. So you'll notice that there's like some squeaky voices probably in the middle of it. Just brace yourself and maybe have a good giggle. I couldn't do anything about it, so I apologize for that part. But I hope you enjoy this podcast. I'll see you on the other side. You're listening to the What's with Cancer podcast. This is your host, Mazina, and I'm a certified health coach, life coach, breathwork facilitator, as well as my mom's caregiver. When my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer back in 2019, the doctors told us she probably wouldn't live past 2 years. But I wasn't willing to give up that easy, and I started learning and implementing absolutely everything I could find out from other people that survived this disease. After seeing my mom go through the ups and downs over the years and successfully outliving her prognosis, it made me realize that there's so much more to learn about this and there's so many unanswered questions. And I want to know, what's with the industry telling us that there's no cure when there's been thousands of people that have overcome a terminal diagnosis? What's with the conflicting information that's presented to us about treatment, diet, and lifestyle? And lastly, what comes with a diagnosis? How do we manage the day-to-day things, the hard conversations, the stress, and our social life whenever our entire world has completely changed? There is nothing worse than feeling helpless, overwhelmed, and lost whenever it comes to a serious diagnosis like cancer. And it is my mission to share stories of hope, insight, and truth to help guide you through the unknown times. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you find value in the show. All right, Jiordana, thank you so much for coming on to the show. I'm really excited to cover a lot of different details with you about the correlation between disease and pathogens and whatnot. But before we begin, I would just love for you to share who you are, what you do, and how you started everything.
Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction and thanks for having me. So my name's Jiordana and I'm a holistic nutritionist and a hypnotherapist. And so my story kind of starts when I was a lot younger. I was obese, and this was when obesity rates were a lot lower. So I was one of the only overweight kids in class. And I received a lot of like ridicule and bullying because of it. And this was really hard on my self esteem. And so when I was like around 8 years old, I went on my first diet, and and I received a lot of validation. Like once I started to lose weight, my parents were like, now we can see your beautiful face. And, the cutest boy in school started talking to me. And so this really just taught me at a young age that if I was thin, it meant I was lovable. And if I was overweight, it meant I was unlovable. And so this catapulted into like years of disordered eating patterns and substance abuse, really just with the prime mindset of wanting to keep my weight low. And when I was living in Montreal, I developed a pretty terrible cocaine addiction, and my parents were like, you need to come home. We need to figure this out. So I moved home, and I just kind of moved from one addiction to the next. So once I didn't have access to cocaine, it became alcohol and food. And when I met my husband, I was like 22 and I got pregnant. And this kind of saved my life because I had to stop all my substances except for food. And so throughout the pregnancy, I gained like 80 pounds. And my doctor was like, this is super unhealthy. Baby's got to come out. And so I kind of vowed to myself then and there that I would really start to understand my food disorders. And so when my son was 9 months old, I went to school to become a holistic nutritionist. And I learned so much more like than I thought I was going to. So this is where my love for functional medicine and rebalancing the body kind of began. It was through this experience at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition. And I really learned, what the three main things that create disease in the body are, and how to rebalance the body, and how to work with like metabolism, et cetera. So anyways, I graduated as valedictorian, and I was hired right out of school to work with a medical doctor. And I worked in his practice for about 4 years, and we built this beautiful obesity practice. But I really just saw the same type of person. Like nobody wakes up and they're like, I want to be unhappy, I want to be overweight. It's just not a choice. And so I became obsessed with understanding the motivation behind people's behavior and how it relates to basically our choices of self sabotage. We all know an apple's healthier than a chocolate bar, but we still choose the chocolate bar anyway. So why is that? And so this for to pursue a master's and PhD in neuropsychology. And that's where I'm at now. So I have like two kind of streams in my practice. One stream is like functional detox and rebalancing the body, which is what we'll be talking about today, I'm assuming. And then the other stream is like food psychology and helping people around obesity and food disorders.
Well, they do go hand in hand. They really do, because that's something where I started was with habits and psychology and formation and like why we do what we do. So you went on quite a horrific journey to figure all this out. And I've heard your story in like detail in other podcasts, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you were on a mission to figure it all out. And through that practice and through not giving up, you found out a lot of things, and you found out about pathogens and stuff like that, and everything. So I do want to talk about the detox and how that kind of came about and where that all goes with the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that ultimately we need to understand that there are only really three ways that the body can become or unbalanced. And so that's through a toxicity, a pathogen, or a deficiency. And when we think about toxicities and deficiencies, like they're also always related to pathogens. Like, why would we ever be deficient in something? It's because something might be stealing our nutrients, or because we have too much stress in our lives. And even when stress is like the main indicator, what stress is going to do is lower the immune system, which allows us to be more susceptible to developing these types of like bacteria and diseases. And so we are exposed to pathogens all the time, like on a daily basis. Like we are exposed to so many of them, but we have this awesome built in system that keeps us resilient. And that's our immune system. And the immune system is very complex. And, we have T cells and B cells, Th1 and Th2 part of the immune system, which honestly is not even important enough to go into right now. But ultimately, we have these built in systems. But if we are constantly exposed to something, or if we go through moments of like high stress, it weakens our immune system, allows these pathogens to come in and kind of take over. So ultimately throughout my own life, when I was studying to be a nutritionist, I was listening to a lot of the symptoms that we had that were in school that were relating to things like Candida and parasites. And I was like, I have a lot of those symptoms. Like we're talking, skin stuff going on, eczema, psoriasis, whatever it may be. Cravings, that was a huge one. And in my practice with obesity, we see that all the time. Like this desire to continuously eat high carbohydrates, high sugary foods, as well as like inconsistent bowels. So, diarrhea, constipation, that kind of thing. I have a life history of constipation and hemorrhoids. And so I begin to kind of ask questions for, what are the root causes of these imbalances? And then how do we overcome them? And it pretty much always comes back down to pathogens.
Which is crazy, because I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, oh, I have a lot of these symptoms. And that's something that I was struggling with. And I just joined your detox program because I'm like, my bowel movements are inconsistent. TMI, not going to lie. But like, I'm like, something's going on. Like my skin is not doing well. So I'm really healthy. And for someone listening, if you're really healthy and you're still experiencing symptoms, and there might be something deeper than that, and it might be pathogens. So let's talk about what are pathogens.
That's a really good question. So, there's different types of pathogens. So we have pathogens that are, and a pathogen is anything that is not human. It's anything that is not a human alive, and also not a plant being. It's like a living organism, we'll say. And so some pathogens are innately inside of us. So inside of our body, we're lined with like bacteria. This is what we call our probiotics or our microbiome. And those are also pathogens, but they're supposed to be there. So there's like, we should have a good ratio of about 90 to 10% bacteria to bad bacteria. And so when we are exposed to any type of like viruses, Candida, pathogen, like any type of viruses, bacteria, uh, parasites, whatever it may be, we basically have this like line of defense with our own good microbiome. But if our microbiome is compromised or if our immune system is weak, then we allow those pathogens in. So some pathogens are like innate to human beings, like certain types of bacteria, as well as Candida. So Candida is a yeast, and it has a specific part in the body where it actually helps to metabolize glucose. So Candida is like really important, but when it grows out of control, when it overtakes our good bacteria, that's when we start to see a lot of these negative symptoms. Whereas a parasite or a virus, these pathogens are not innate to the body and they should never be in the body, really. And that's when we start to see it wreaking havoc on our immune system, because they are so powerful and they should never be there. That's why they're called parasite, right? Like they literally steal from us and they're like not supposed to be there. So that's when they start to overpower the immune system. Was that clear?
Yeah, no, that's super clear. So there's, pathogens that our body requires and needs to be able to function and stay in homeostasis. And then there's like parasites and other pathogens that do not belong there. And how do we get those? How do we get the ones that we're not supposed to have?
Yeah. So most of the time they start out completely microscopic. So like we are not even aware when we are exposed to them. And like I mentioned, we have many lines of defense in our body. So the most common place we would get something like a parasite is like unwashed lettuce. Like a lot of people say, no, I don't eat sushi, I don't eat meat, but like we're talking unwashed lettuce here, or like in our water, right? This is why when you travel and you go to another country, you can develop things like traveler's diarrhea or get a parasite there, and it feels really big and scary because their ecosystem is different from our ecosystem. But within our own ecosystem, even, we're exposed to these parasites or pathogens all the time, and we have mechanisms in the body. Like one of the first one is in our stomach. It's our hydrochloric acid, and our hydrochloric acid is literally designed to sterilize our stomach. So when we eat foods like sushi or whatever, or even that unwashed piece of lettuce, it goes into our mouth, goes into our stomach, and our hydrochloric acid is supposed to sterilize it completely. But our hydrochloric acid gets reduced if we're like in moments of stress. So it kind of like all relates back to, how strong, how resilient is your terrain. So once stomach acid is reduced, or even if we're eating and walking around, like if we're not seated down and mindfully eating, we're eating on the go, or we're like eating while driving, we have like no hydrochloric acid, right? And so then that's our first line of defense. So once those organisms can get inside, then they can begin to grow out of control. They can attach themselves to the wall, the intestinal wall. They can travel to our liver, to our ovaries, to our brain, wherever they want to go, really. And there's actually this one type of parasite that can live in the body for like 72 years and like completely dormant, and waits for an opportunistic moment for your immune system to be reduced and then begins to proliferate.
That
So
sounds
these are
like
very
Lyme.
smart.
Yeah, that sounds like Lyme disease. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Disease is like one of those types of parasitic organisms, but there's many like that.
Okay, so whenever you're talking about stress and how that can compromise the immune system and enable these parasites to pass through and live in our systems, are you talking about like just like physical stress, like I'm stressing and worrying about other things, but also there is the stress that you can put on your body whenever you're eating like high inflammatory foods and stuff like that? Is that another way? Yeah.
So the funny thing is the body actually doesn't know the difference between different types of stress. So when we experience stress, what's really happening is we have this stress lives in our primitive part of the brain. Okay. So we have the brain, the spinal cord, and all of our peripheral nerves that attach out from the spinal cord and detect things, right? These peripheral nerves are detecting, am I cold? Am I hot? How much acid do I have in the stomach? It's detecting internal stuff, but also external stuff. So let's say that we're eating a diet in high inflammatory foods. Our nerves are going to detect like, this is foreign, this isn't supposed to be here. And it's going to send a message up to the brain, and the brain's going to be like, oh no, sound the alarm. And it's going to send a message back down. And this is the stress response, right? It's threat to survival, and threat to survival can exist if we're feeling anxious about something. Like if we perceive danger when it's not really there, financial stress, emotional stress, relationship stress, even over exercising can be stressful. Not sleeping is stress. So like the body actually doesn't know the difference because it's the same chemicals that are released in the body, right?
Yeah.
It's just the stress response. It's cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, right? But the nervous system, the conscious part of ourselves that makes us human, can identify and distinguish between relationships, mental stress, food stress. But in the body, it's all the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that I clarified that because a lot of people just imagine that stress is just the worry, but it's like what you're actually doing to your body too, or what your body is undergoing. So, how
Yeah.
do parasites, pathogens, and all that, how do they correlate or how do they show up in diseases?
Yeah. So a lot of the time, like I said, the body can only really become imbalanced three ways, right? Deficiency, toxicity, and pathogen. And when we classify something as a disease, this is a human thing. Like we are human beings who have looked at a collection of symptoms and created a name for it. Okay. So when we talk about the state of disease, regardless of what your condition is, regardless of what the medical system decides, like, oh, you have A, B, or C, Hashimoto's, whatever it is, high blood pressure, it doesn't really matter because all that's happening in the body is weaknesses are your body is or it essentially provoke her. So parasites are going to innately reduce the body's ability to anything. Like parasites can hijack organs. So, if a parasite is going to go to the liver, for example, a liver fluke, which is one I see most commonly in my practice, the liver flukes are going to burrow themselves into the biliary ducts. And the biliary ducts is where we send bile to the gallbladder, which helps us emulsify fat. So from like a very like low level, low base perspective of what's going on here, now you have an organism, a person who is not going to be able to digest any fats properly. So that's going to affect their bowels. They're not going to be able to digest any fat soluble vitamins. So that's vitamin A, D, E, or K. And we all know vitamin A and D are so important for us, right? And then we have also too, like the gallbladder not being able to function properly, and our liver where we kind of we filter out all of the toxins from our blood. But if it can't do that, then where are these toxins going to go? Well, they're going to get stored in other tissues, right? And so it's just this like huge cyclical cycle. And depending on the type of parasite that you're exposed to, like it's never just one that we have many different kinds at once, because once we have one, our immune system's weakened, and then we're exposed to others, we're exposed to others. So these are like co-infections. So it just depends on how long you've had them for and where the weaknesses in your body are, so that the certain symptoms are expressed, and then we just categorize it as a disease.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, because I was reading a book, and it's called I Used to Have Cancer. And he claims that the first thing, like, unless you get rid of these parasites, unless you get rid of all of this stuff that's causing your body to go into a disease state, then you're not going to be able to heal from or recover from whatever disease you're, encountering. Do you believe that's true, that statement?
100%.
Yeah.
There are some things that we can control, like if we're in an abusive relationship, right? Like there are some stressors where we can make a decision and get out of that situation. You don't have to run 20 kilometers a day. You could go for a walk instead, right? But then there are things that are happening inside our body that it's not just a simple choice. Like I can't just, one day wake up and be like, I just choose that the parasites will go away without like doing anything about it. And so if the body's in a state of disease, we have to find where's the root cause. And the root cause always comes down to a toxicity, a pathogen, or a deficiency. And so, and oftentimes it's all three, right?
Yeah,
And
because
so,
the pathogens cause the deficiency. So, like, yeah, it's a
yeah,
vicious circle.
exactly. And so when we talk about like rebalancing the body or like returning to a state of homeostasis or really healing from whether it be cancer or an autoimmune disorder, it's all the same process. Like we first have to get rid of the junk, get rid of the stuff that's causing the problem, the imbalance. And that also includes things in our environment. Like, are we using toxic toothpaste? We drinking toxic water? Like all of this stuff adds up, fills the barrel. And if we don't empty it out, then that's when we start to see the disease happen. So yeah.
A lot of people, I think, are so quick to jump on, like, what supplements can I add? But we're really talking about removing all of the stuff that's causing the underlying issue, why it even began in the first place. So if
100%.
someone's listening here and being like, oh my gosh, how do I know parasites? What are some different ways that someone can kind of self-diagnose? I know most people probably do have parasites in some form or manner, but like just break down some of the symptoms that some people could be experiencing that might indicate to them, oh, I might need to take a look into this.
Yeah. So I think you had like if you're wondering if you have parasites or not, you do. So like that's just that, especially if you've never done any type of cleansing before. We all have them. It's like not it's normal but not natural to have them. Like it's common, but it's not like a natural thing. Um, However, sometimes your immune system is strong enough to kind of fight them off. So I'm going to give you an example. Like I work with two sisters in my practice, and one of them, they both have parasites for sure, but one of them doesn't experience any symptoms really. She just mainly has like a bit of bloating and gas. And then the other one's got like skin stuff, eczema. Says she's got inconsistent bowel. She grinds her teeth at night. And so parasites, but one of them has a stronger terrain. So I think interested in just health in general, then doing a parasite cleanse every now and then, like once every 4 years, is just beneficial right from the get-go. But if you are experiencing certain types of symptoms, so I already named a few, but like anything digestive going on. So we've got like gas, bloating, acid reflux, like these are all very common signs. Teeth grinding at night, things like brain fog. So anything going on in the head, brain fog, tension in the head, tightness. If you have an itchy anus, so like especially right in the bum hole, that's usually pin. And if any of these symptoms are exasperated in the full moon or around the full moon and new moon time, like it's for sure parasites. If you have constipation or diarrhea, if you're just like always tired, and if you have any skin stuff going on. So that's a pretty like compulsory list, but it's pretty much always points back to parasites. And parasite, the reason why the full moon is because parasites actually come out in the full moon to mate. So like oftentimes we're exposed to them from our digestive system, right? That's most common place. We get exposed from the digestive system, and then if we don't fight them off, then they go to different organs. So they go from the digestive system to the liver, to the ovaries, to the brain. So during the full moon, they actually come out from their like hiding place and meet in the digestive system, make eggs, and then they go back into their place.
Okay, so interesting. So if someone's listening to this and they want to do a parasite cleanse, what do they do?
Yeah, so it's a bit more of a complicated process than just like picking something up off the shelf. Like there are over the counter remedies, especially if you're going to like health food stores. Like there's like 30-day parasite kits and stuff. And I mean, if you're going to do that or nothing at all, like I would even argue for nothing at all just to make sure we're doing it safely. Because if you're somebody who's experiencing a lot of these symptoms, like I would say 3 or more of them, then ultimately these infections are pretty deep rooted. And so if we were just to like kill the parasites or take an herb that would kill the parasites. So, for example, like oregano is a pretty powerful anti-parasitic herb, especially when it's in the oil. So, if we're going to take that continuously and kill the parasites, they're going to die and release something called die-off symptoms. So, oftentimes parasites really go in hand with like heavy metal toxicities, and they're holding on to a lot of different like toxicities and that can be in the body. And so when we kill them, they release all these die-off symptoms and we can get really, really sick. So this was my experience the first time I did parasite cleansing. I was in school learning about all this and I was like, I have all of these symptoms. I jumped the gun. I just went right into it. And I started to get really ill. Like I couldn't even really stand up. My blood pressure dropped. My face was completely green, like completely green. I couldn't eat anything. I was vomiting. And so this was a perfect example, especially because of the change in my skin color, that my liver was compromised, right? So whenever we see like yellow tinges to the skin or the eyes or green tinges, it's always the liver and bile toxicity and sluggishness. And so what had happened was I didn't open the doors properly. That's not a medical term. Opening the doors is what I call it. But we basically have 7 areas of elimination. It's not just like the liver or the bowels. We have 7 of them, right? And so if we're going to do this parasite cleanse properly, we need to make sure all of these areas of elimination are open. So we have the skin, the lymph system, the bowels, the liver, the kidneys, the blood, and I'm missing one, the respiratory system. And so even when we breathe out, we take like breaths in and out, like that's a release of toxins. And all of these symptoms all of these organs need to be open before we start to detox. So what I do with my clients is, it's a 4-month process. Like this isn't like a 30-day get better soon type of thing. And for some people, depending on what we find, it's double that. Like I would never go more than 8 months though. There are some parasite cleanses where we're talking like 1 or 2 years. And I just think that also too is stressful for the body. So we want to make sure we have a good balance of eliminating parasites, but then also strengthening the immune system, not to deplete ourselves more. So the first month is really dedicated to just like opening up the doors. In the second month, we tackle some of the smaller, like microscopic parasites, and we tackle other pathogens like Candida, H. pylori, etc. And then in the third month, we tackle the big guys. So these are the nematodes. These are the really big worm-looking ones, and this is like the funnest month. Like all of my clients were like, I don't know if I have parasites. In the third month, they're like, okay, we found them. And then in the fourth month, we kind of seal up the gut and repopulate with good bacteria and reduce the inflammation and just do like one last kind of sweep out.
That is so my mom. She's like, I don't think I have parasites, but I'm going to do this cleanse with you. And I'm like, dude, you have parasites. I know you do. And I know I have parasites because I was waking up bloated. And that was like an immediate, like, this is not normal. I cook all my food from scratch. Like if you guys follow me, like I do all the work, and I'm like, there's something more intense going on here. So you do those cleanses. That's a detox. I'll link all of her information below for you guys that are listening, that you're curious looking into this program. Cause me and my mom were doing it, and I didn't even I was like, nope, we're doing this. This is 100%. It's a 4-month commitment, but it's, one of those things that I, without a doubt, know would absolutely change anyone's life. But let's pivot a little bit here, since we are on the podcast called What's with Cancer. I'm just curious, because I know you have a story how cancer has shown up in your life. So what is the story there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have 2 accounts of how cancer has shown up in my life. And so when I was in grade 9, I was 13 years old, and my dad was diagnosed with colon cancer. And so that was really difficult for me because I'm like such a daddy's girl. My dad is my hero. I'm obsessed with him. And my dad is also very tough. And so this was the first time I had ever seen him cry. And I'm 13 years old. My dad gets diagnosed with cancer, and then my first love breaks up with me in the same week. So like I'm a disaster. Like like my whole world just came crashing down. And this is actually what also instigated like years and years of substance abuse, right? And so my dad he had stage 4 cancer, and we took out his colon, a huge part of his colon. And then from there, he kind of developed other things like Lewy body dementia, which often happens when there's Alzheimer's that runs in the family, and his mom had Alzheimer's. And so basically doctors were like, he has 2 weeks to live. Like he's not going to get better. He didn't even know who I was. Like not only did the chemotherapy really affect his body, but his mental state was completely gone. Like he reverted back to he's Arabic. So he reverted back to only speaking Arabic. He didn't even know who I was. It was awful. And so after we stopped the chemotherapy and we were basically like stop all treatment, I was starting to get more interested into health and et cetera. And so we cut all meat out of the diet, and we started there. And now I will tell you, my dad is 8. He just turned 78. Today is his birthday. So love you, Dad. Yeah, so cute, right? And he just turned 78, and he is like the healthiest person. He's very picky with what he eats, and like he should be. And so it really does start with food, but we've done everything. We've done the parasite cleansing. We've done the rebalancing of the body, and like he like climbs trees in the summer. Like he's so strong. He's so cognitive. He's going to outlive us all. So that's my first account with my dad. And then my eldest sister, she actually had breast cancer. And so she decided not to do the chemotherapy, but did the radiation. And she actually hasn't bought into the parasite cleanse yet. So I like continue to be like, we need to do it. But she also continues to show up with malignant cells. Right. And so although it's being monitored quite closely, like I think that if we don't really get to the root of the issue, and for her, like she's also quite high strung, then it will come back, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my story.
That's so crazy. And your dad was stage 4, and that's like terminal, like there's no going back, like we can't do anything. And then he just simply changed his diet, and he's still with us today.
Yeah. So a lot of it was, the diet change, getting the stuff out of the environment, but then it was also too, and like, I'm not here to tell you what your course of treatment should be with cancer at all. This is something you should be figuring out with your oncologist for sure, and trusting your intuition. But a lot of it was, not continuing with the chemotherapy, because at the end of the day, like when you're stage 4 cancer, you're already so weak. And so when we put something into the body that's like such a poison, it's going to like create other deficiencies and imbalances in the body. And for my dad and his side of the family, the weakness is the nervous system, right? Like my grandmother died of Alzheimer's. And so once we started to take out the toxicity of the chemotherapy, even, he began to get a bit stronger and a bit stronger. And then we're changing the diet, and we're like looking for the root cause. And so it just all started to get better and better. And, this is happening over the course of years, but he's been cancer free for like 15 years now.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
exactly 15 years. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, happy birthday to your dad.
I
Um,
know.
oh, that's so sweet. So we covered a lot here. I know it's probably a lot for people to digest, especially if you've never heard of pathogens or parasites. So I'm curious though, Jordana, if someone were to come to you and they were just, either newly diagnosed or they had been diagnosed with cancer, what would be like the first couple steps that you would say or give advice for them to do?
Yeah, so I would start with, there's the 4 R's, right, of recovery. So the first is like remove. So we have to remove the stuff, and then remove, replace, reinoculate, and repair. So the remove is like we remove everything out of the environment. No like fluoride in the toothpaste. Like we're drinking clean water. We're getting the shit out of the body that doesn't belong there. And then we replace the deficiencies. So if cancer were to exist in a body, there's likely a lot of deficiencies, especially in the immune system, that are preventing the body from being able to work optimally. So then we would work on kind of replacing all those deficiencies, and then reinoculate. So this is where we put the good bacteria back in, and then repair. So then we start to repair the cells, repair the gut, repair the nervous system, wherever the cancer is, right? So, but you always start with the remove cycle, and we can all do this right now. Like we can all just like look around and see like, okay, what do I have in my environment that's like toxic? Like for me, it's like I still wear toxic eye mascara. I'm sorry, like, I will admit it. But there's always something we can clean up. Like we no longer use fluoride toothpaste. We use really good shampoo, like natural shampoos and conditioners. But like I could even still now remove things from my environment, right?
Yeah, 100%. Whenever I first started finding out about toxins and stuff that's like in our laundry detergent or like the aluminum that's in our deodorant, I like went nuts. I'm like, oh my gosh. And like anything that says fragrance in it, I just like started canning everything. But I mean, our bodies are designed to be able to metabolize and break down some of these toxins. It's just the like how it builds up, and our body can only handle so much. So if you're just compiling all of it, and especially if you have anything like cancer, it's probably just best to get rid of everything, but like not to like frighten everyone and be like, you have to eliminate absolutely everything. It is a bit of a process, and not to be in that fear state, because, like Jordana was saying, even if you're in a fear state, then you're causing cortisol, and we don't want that. So just taking it step by step, day by day, and not freaking out like I did, because I remember that was really hard on me. And I actually got sick around then, which is ironic because I was clearing out everything so quickly. And
Yeah.
obsessing over it, really.
Yeah. And what I'll say to that point is that, like, you're absolutely right. We have mechanisms in our body. Like, when I was working with the medical doctor, like, in Western medicine, they're just taught very different things, right? So we would have conversations like this, and he's like, I don't know, do we need to be worrying about the toothpaste? And I'm like, well, but we basically, our bodies are still very primitive. It takes millions and millions of years for evolution to happen. Like it's going to be another million years more before we grow another pinky or a wing or whatever it is, right? Like hundreds of millions of years. And so our bodies are simply not designed to be able to handle the amount of toxins in our environment. Like on average right now, you are exposed to in one day about 2.4 million toxins in your environment. That's ridiculous. 200 years ago, there were 7 to 10 toxins in our environment. Like our liver just like simply can't keep up. So it's not a question of like, should we be detoxing? Should we not? We don't have to go like balls to the walls, everything out today, but every single day we can make like little micro changes that overall is going to have a bigger impact.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so the 3 R's, that's something that you support your clients with.
Yeah.
And then how can people find you? Where can they find more information? How can they find what you're doing and more information on what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is themindfulclinic.com. I'm sure you'll link it up, but full is spelled like full belly with 2 L's. And then I'm also on Instagram. So I'm just at the Mindful Clinic Inc. And yeah, I'm most active there. I'm not a super techie person. Oh, I also have a podcast. That's good. It's called Head to Heal. And I talk a lot about that stuff there. So yeah, if you ever, and I'm really like open and easy to talk to. So you can always just even email me.
Yeah. Her podcast is awesome, guys. I'll link that too, because it's really good to listen to. But other than that, is there anything else on your heart, on your mind that you want to share before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd just say that, if you're somebody who's going through cancer yourself, or you have a family member who is, and it seems like everything is not going to work out. Like, just know that there are always situations where it does. So like waking up with, that kind of like optimism and like curiosity, what can we do today to like help this get better is really the way that I would approach it. Because I mean, I was 13 when I dealt with a lot of this, and that was like very heavy for a 13-year-old. But now looking on the outside, like really, I believe that there's always a way out. And so just to remain optimistic and like to just get all the other stress out of your life. Like, life's hard enough, just get it out.
Yeah. Amen to that. Like, honestly, just having that belief on it, like, has been the most consistent thing that I've been talking to people that have overcome their cancer diagnosis, is just that belief and that optimism. It changes everything. Your mind is so much more powerful than we give it credit for. And when we give up, then that's kind of it, right?
Yeah. Your subconscious thinking, your beliefs about yourself dictate exactly what you experience. So like I've never personally experienced cancer, but like I do know that with the survivors, they're like, I'm kicking this in the butt. Like, this is like, I believe 100% in my ability to recover, and it just stems from there.
Yeah, your willingness to believe is the first step for sure. All right, my love. Well, thank you so much for sharing such in-depth information and your wealth of knowledge. I hope everyone gets a chance to follow Jiordana, whether it be on Instagram or get her podcast into your ears, because she's amazing and she's helping so many people. And I appreciate you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Before you head off, I'd love to give you a free resource of mine. When my mom was first diagnosed, the only thing I had control over is what I cooked her, but I had no idea what to make. But after a couple years, I've learned a thing or two. So I went ahead and made a quick start recipe guide for anyone that is just looking for the basic first steps that they need to take. This recipe guide includes many different recipes that I use with my mom, I know are extremely healing and also easy to make. So if you want to get this free download, you can just check out the show notes below or go to whatswithcancer.com/quick start guide. That is whatswithcancer.com/quick start guide. And there will be a place where you can just submit your email and it will send straight to your email with about 20 plus variations of recipes that you can start making tomorrow. All right, my friends, I hope you have the most blessed day. We will see you next time.